Test, test. 1, 2, 3. My name is Amir Taaki. I developed the first alternative Bitcoin implementation. I also made the first UK Bitcoin exchange, which was the second biggest on the market until it was closed by the banks. I worked on, I was managing Electrum projects for several months, and then I left to create a dark wallet project. I also created the first decentralized market, which is called Dark Market, which later developed into Open Bazaar. I worked on a bunch of other software as well. And then in early 2015, I left to North Syria to join the YPG. I was on the front line for several months. And then I left to the civil society, where I worked on economic projects to do with energy and agriculture. And then now I've come back and I'm establishing an academy to train hackers. Firstly, I'm driven through ideals, and wherever there's an opportunity, I'm going to take that. I have skills in technology. I also have skills in design. I've worked in many different areas. I have a strong maths background as well, but I also have a historical and a social knowledge. So I try to combine all these things together in a meaningful way. The main issue in society today is not an economic problem. It's a social problem. It's not a question of how we distribute wealth. For example, people work their entire lives. Jobs that they know is completely pointless, has no meaning whatsoever, to earn a piece of paper which is printed by a central bank. There's like fundamentally like a lack of meaning or a lack of purpose, we kind of feel like we're just like part of like a giant machine, and it's like totalizing reality that just form like an integrated thing that snaps shut around us, and kind of give us little spheres of freedom, but there's no kind of overarching higher sense of or theme to our lives. Like we're just atoms in a sea of atoms waiting to be extinguished. Yeah, it's certainly true that there is a system of material production, of subdivision of human labor into different specializations. One guy's a doctor, one guy's a filmmaker, one guy's an engineer, and so on. And this leads obviously to more material production. I'm sitting here, I'm benefiting off of that. I can't claim not to be a part of that. At the same time, more than ever, there's a general sense of apathy, of powerlessness, of general selfishness in the society, of a kind of like pervasive nihilism. The kind of work that we're doing is not fulfilling, and maybe there is a way to kind of recover like an aspect of society has been lost. We kind of said that we're going to reduce everything down to what can be measured, what can be calculated, what can be defined. But maybe there's like an aspect of human reality that give us some sense of ambition or drive. And it's not that we need to get rid of one thing to replace it with another thing, but it's recognizing what around us is missing, what has been lost, and how can we maybe reconfigure what's there to bring back or recover something more ancient, something that's older. Yeah, well, today we live in a democracy, but some would argue that political participation or the ability to meaningfully change your environment is lower than it's ever been in history. There's an adage that if you went to ancient Greece, you would look around you and you'd say, well, how can they call this a free society? Women can't own property, they can't hold positions in public office, they own slaves, Like, what is free about this society? But at the same time, if you brought an ancient Greek back to the modern society, they would look around themselves and they would say, how can you call this a free society? You know, you don't make decisions in a public office. You have somebody else do that for you. You can't address the nation on issues of great importance. You know, you don't even defend yourself in a court of law. In fact, in Athens they had a law that made it illegal to have a lawyer. You don't even defend yourself. You have a professional police and a professional military. How can you call this a free society? And there's a saying that once the people of Athens desired to be free from responsibility, the people of Athens were no longer free, and they were never free ever again. There is this kind of, we've engineered the perfect machine, and the perfect machine is continually getting better all the time. In fact, in terms of efficiency of production, new techniques are constantly being invented. But, you know, to what end? To what degree? You know, if we eventually we might say that actually the human beings are extra in this system. Maybe we can just replace them with robots. Well, it's like, for example, everything today is so about growth, and we can look at our culture. Look at the movies. In the movies, it's all about which film have the better special effects, or in music, it's like which have the most amount of instruments, or in books, who can sell the most copies. In fact, more recently, I picked up a Dostoevsky, and I was looking at that book and I was thinking to myself, incredible. This is a kind of book that people in the past, hundreds of years ago, used to read in their spare time. Now look at the book that everybody reads today. The most popular book is literally about a boy who rides a magical broomstick. Our culture is just about piling mass upon mass. There's no kind of like brilliance or kind of genius to it. All of that has been lost. Our architecture is about building bigger and bigger buildings. None of them look beautiful. I mean, you see some of these old buildings that were built over many generations. A guy placing down a brick, knowing that he would never see the result of that work. You know, he planting like a seed, which you will never see the tree that grows. We've completely lost that logic today. Everything today is about fast growth, fast immediate results. There's no kind of like placing ourselves towards some kind of greater long-term work, even a work that goes beyond our lifetimes. Yes, there is a way out of this crisis, and we have to think about the idea. What is the purpose of society, and what is the purpose of life, which is the birth, the new, higher type of human being. What is a human being? Human being is many things. You know, a human being is not some aspect of humanity. A human being is something greater. You know, like maybe none of us are human beings. Maybe to become a human being is a lifelong process. There used to be this idea of the Renaissance man, like somebody who knew the arts, who knew literature, who knew science, who also who was good at physical exercise. You know, this is a kind of fulfilling life that we can try to create for ourselves, where all of that potential that exists inside of us as human beings is there for us to kind of reach out and take. Like, not simply that, you know, there is a human being, that human being is led by his biological functions, by a material incentive. We give him a bit of money, he does this work, you know, it improves the efficiency of this mechanical apparatus to achieve this objective. You know, maybe it's actually about what is the type of human beings that we're creating? What is the goal of people's lives? You know, how people want to dedicate their lives. You know, and I can't tell people what the mission of their life should be. That comes through cultivating our skills and working towards some kind of life project. And often that life project we find isn't going to be something that's fun, but something that we see longer term as having some kind of impactful meaning or purpose. In terms of like a greater objective for a movement, I can talk about Öcalan's theories about democratic confederalism and how we can reconfigure the state to create to create a democratic culture, to recover like a older form of human social organization that has been lost in the modern age. But in terms of the individual type of human being, that's something that we need to actively create. And in some ways we're kind of laying the foundation for the emergence in the future of some type of person we can't possibly imagine. Technology is a power of shaping the world around us. We live in an industrial, technical society. In some ways technology is kind of a spectral gift from the gods, from beyond. And like an important component of humanity, of human mythology, of human history, is technology. And we are in the modern incarnation of a technological phenomena, which is what this cryptography movement is about. Into our hands has fallen some technological means. It's up to us to employ it for sociological change. One of the earliest mythologies is the story of Kawa, the blacksmith, who there was a tyrant who was enslaving all of the people. He was a despotic, authoritarian military ruler, and Kawa taught all of his people the knowledge of ironworking tools, so they could make weapons to resist against the ruler and overthrow him. That's our objective, these means of power is to take this and to arm the people to realize a new societal paradigm. To be honest, behind all the hippie-happy rhetoric, there is a world right now which is seeing a rise of right-wing dictator-like figures in Brazil, in Philippines, throughout Europe, many countries. Religious fundamentalism, nationalistic movements. There's a huge amount of suffering, and this technology is not going to be a liberation for rich people in the West, who's already pretty comfortable with the system they're living in. Just like happened with the ideas of Marx, was that some people came from the third world who learned those ideas and took them back to their country and used it to radically reshape the society they were living in. And that's what's going to happen with these technologies we're creating. It's going to somehow migrate itself to other parts of the world where people actually have a need for these technologies, where people led through desperation, who with the will make active use of them, whether it's they're fighting a war, whether they're in poverty, any number of these factors. Technologies for human social organization, for making decisions, for sharing information, for collaborating on projects, for financial and economic activity, and for society and culture and education. I basically named what are the main areas of human society: politics, law, self-defense, society, culture, gender relations, economy. So all of those areas, we need to think how we're going to touch those areas with technology. So a lot of these concepts of cryptography were invented in the 80s and the 90s, but for some reason they just never made their way out to public consciousness. With the emergence of Bitcoin, Bitcoin managed to touch a nexus of libertarians and free software types. Different ideological communities existed inside of the internet with a very powerful discourse. Like a form of peer-to-peer money that cannot be controlled by governments and central banks. And what's happened from that is, from the enthusiasm and growth of Bitcoin, people started to think, Okay, what is the implications, bigger implications of this technology? And they've started to go back into the academic work, and all of this very disparate knowledge that existed in very specialized fields before, now people are kind of making attempts to kind of put them together, and maybe people don't have the experience, it's a lot of new work, but nobody's actually ever put these very diverse fields of knowledge together before. Like some of these fields, they even talk about this very similar concept. They use a completely different language. For example, zero knowledge systems, and that's been a form of research going on for decades, but nobody actually thought how to apply it to the real world. And I place less emphasis on the blockchain as a technical innovation. It's interesting, it has some uses, but in general, what is the real value of this is the huge momentum of all of these very young, idealistic people with more money than God, with a huge amount of capital, really thinking about how they can transform society and politics. Okay, there is no shortage of technical brilliance or plans or ideas, but they're all kind of like puzzle pieces laying around. And the most important objective for us is to kind of have a visualization about where we want to end, where we want to go to, so we can start to take these pieces and we can start to put them together into a kind of vehicle that will take us to where we want to end up. I don't want to talk for a big abstract we, but I think the most important dilemma facing the centralized civilization today is how we can kind of democratize the form of that, increase people's public participation, and reconstruct the destroyed social moral fabric of society. Technology by itself cannot change the mentality of people, but it can be a very empowering factor for movements that do want to do that. So, for example, in terms of the Kurdish movement, if they're trying to construct a new societal paradigm based off of direct democracy and based off of empowering the individual and developing technologies for coordination, for making more efficient their types of institutions in that society, can empower that social movement to be stronger and to achieve success.